So I know we were just talking about how we should all get along and we all need to cooperate and root each other on because of those are common beliefs for your archetype. I want you to start to think about your archetype as a character. And a character lives in a story, right? So like a character lives in the plot of a movie or in the stories in a TV show, your brand lives in your brand story. And you're going to continue to tell your brand story with every time you talk to your customers. So you'll tell your brand story on your about page, in your emails, on your social media posts, etc. And every story needs a few things for it to be interesting. One thing you absolutely need is a villain. If the character in the story always gets what they want, never has any problems, and is happy the entire time, that's not a story at all. That's a motivational quote. So you need to figure out what your brand is up against so that you can rally your community in all in one direction. They'll root for you if they know what you're up against. And here are some of the things that the girl or guy next door archetype is up against. So authorities who take advantage of their place of power is a big frustration and villain for your archetype. People who think that they're better than you, selfishness, competition, toxic friendships can be really harmful because you rely so much on your friends and you give so much to your friends that ones that turn toxic really, really irk you because that's one of your most important things about your archetype and about your life, honestly. People who are entitled or irresponsible, people who exploit, people who are down or who can't help themselves, victimization, and betrayal. These are all ideas that if you created a story around, if you talked about a time where you felt like you were betrayed by authorities who were taking advantage of their power, your ideal clients and customers would feel a deep emotional bond to you because they understand how painful that is for your archetype and how frustrating that is for you as a brand. We're going to talk more about the story structures in a later video, but do some reflection here and think about what the biggest challenges are for you as a brand. Next, continuing the brand as a character metaphor. Every character has flaws. So as much as we love our characters for the strengths that they also have a set of weaknesses that correspond to those strengths. So if you are extremely friendly and you help everybody get along, there's also a chance that you have the weakness that you might lose your own identity and perhaps bend your values or bend your beliefs sometimes to make sure that everybody gets along. So for every two, there is a fro. For every black, there is a white. So, and this isn't a bad thing. We understand that people have pitfalls. If you were perfect, you wouldn't be believable. So we understand that you are an imperfect person. You're an imperfect brand. Your company isn't perfect, however big that it is or however small that it is. So the pitfalls are things that you are uniquely susceptible to and uniquely vulnerable to since you are the archetype that you are, whether it's your primary or your secondary archetype. So these are things that you don't necessarily have to try to get rid of because they're inherent in your personality. They're a part of you. You just have to be aware of them so they don't have too big of a negative impact or take on too big of a role and really harm you. So again, losing your identity can be an issue, or having to sacrifice your beliefs to preserve the sense of community. You'll have to figure out what that balance is for you. Oftentimes, your archetype has a distrust or a cynicism about authority, people who are super successful, all of those institutions that promise to take care of us and then end up not taking care of us. That's a reoccurring theme for your archetype. Ironically, at your best, you band together with your community, with your peers, and you collaborate and you all rise together. When you're not at your best, sometimes after you've been burned, you hesitate to let anybody else help you. You get it sent like a fierce sense of inner resilience, and I'll just take care of this myself. So you have to make sure that you balance your own resourcefulness with the ability to accept help from others. In your pursuit to build a community, sometimes it's hard to acknowledge that you are a leader of that community, and that that role looks a little bit different than all of the members of the community. It can also be hard for you to say no sometimes. So take a look through all of these pitfalls, see where your own personal weaknesses are. And again, this isn't an issue of trying to get rid of them. It's just an issue of awareness. And these become really interesting stories as well that you can talk about. These are themes that come up that you can use as prompts to tell stories about times that you were dealing with things like this. And honestly, by being vulnerable and by showing us your weaknesses and acknowledging them, because we see them in each other all the time because humans are very intuitive. But when you are self-aware enough to acknowledge them, we love you for them even more. Now, on the flip side, this what to do list, what to avoid list is your never, ever, ever do this list, would probably be a better name. These are things that are so oppositional to your core brand beliefs that if you do them, people won't understand where you're coming from. They'll feel like you've lost your way or that you are having a crisis of identity because you're acting completely opposite of the things that you stand for normally. So adopting super high premium pricing is not typically a good route for your brand. Some brands manage to balance this by not advertising their super, super high premium pricing and just offering that more personally. But being known as the expensive option in the market is not on brand for your archetype. Trying to adopt that guru or authority persona, you're better off being in the trenches with your ideal client and taking the shots along with them. Also, putting too much focus on yourself instead of the community feels disgenuine. The reason why we love your archetype so much is because you bring us together, and that is value in enough. We appreciate you so much for doing that, that if you try to steal the spotlight too much, it feels like you're taking away from that original value that you created. Being inaccessible is not very on brand for you. So we all understand that this is real life and that you have a life outside of your business and outside of your brand. But it does pay to make yourself accessible as possible. So offer phone calls, offer support if people need it. These types of things are what we expect from you. Also, if you idolize or place too high of a value on the celebrities and influencers in your industry, it comes off really bizarre because typically your archetype is so focused on their peer group and serving their peer group and serving their community that it would be weird if you thought that people were above you or above that. Also, ideas without implementation. You at your heart are a doer. So you create these communities. You do the work that makes the great, that impacts the greater good. You're not a big sit and ponderer. You actually get stuff done. That's another reason why we love you. So avoid these things, these like business tactics or personality slip ups to make sure that you stay on your archetype. This will, and also, think through your pitfalls and think through this list and come up with your own not to do list. It is even more important to figure out what you aren't, as at the same time that you're figuring out what you are and where you're going.